Haike Manning recently assumed the role of New Zealand ambassador to Vietnam, arriving in Hanoi in October 2012. Haike joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade in 1996 and has been posted previously as New Zealand Deputy High Commissioner in India from 1999 to 2002 and Deputy Head of Mission in Brazil from 2004 to 2008. Haike's career focus in recent years has been on trade policy and trade negotiations. His most recent role was as Deputy Director in Ministry's Trade Negotiations Division, which involved senior New Zealand negotiating roles in both the WTO and Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations.
Hello, you're watching Chang Vietnam on VTC10 Net Viet. I'm Văn Hiệp, and in today's program, we'll meet one special guest from New Zealand. And now, may I introduce to you His Excellency, Mr. New Zealand Ambassador to Vietnam. So, hello, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you very much for joining us today. The Tet holiday has just gone. So, how did you enjoy the Tet holiday in Vietnam?
Well, Tet's a great time of the year. We all get a great holiday, and there are some fantastic traditions here in Vietnam. So we stayed in Hanoi, and it was a beautifully quiet time, not as much traffic on the streets as normal. We follow some of the traditions that I think Vietnamese also follow with the hoa đào and the cam quat trees in our house. Lucky money, and also we went to the pagodas and the temples during Tet as well. There really is nothing else like it, I think, anywhere else in the world, with the possible exception of some of the Vietnamese communities which are living in other countries, such as New Zealand. And there I know the many Vietnamese students that are living and studying in New Zealand also do their versions of Tet, and no doubt have had a great Tet in New Zealand as well.
Tet is the time that we review the past year, and we know that Vietnam and New Zealand have established a bilateral comprehensive partnership since 2009 and an action plan for 2010-2013 containing specific initiatives to help implement the partnership was signed in July 2010. So may you share the results of the 2010-2013 action plan?
Vietnam and New Zealand have become very good friends and very good partners over that time, and I think we're going to see a strengthening of that in the coming years as well. We've seen a lot of political, high-level political engagement, so visitors from Vietnam to New Zealand and also from New Zealand to Vietnam during that time, and that's really, really important because that connection between our leaders is what really drives, I think, the relationship and inspires the relationship, if you like. In terms of specific things that have been done, obviously we've built quite significantly the trade during that time between our two countries. We've had really good developments in the education relationship. But not only that, we've also done agreed some important government agreements with Vietnam, such as the Working Holiday Scheme, which is a scheme that enables young Vietnamese to go down and live and work and holiday in New Zealand for up to 12 months, and likewise permits New Zealanders to come up to Vietnam and to do the same. And also we negotiated and have concluded a double taxation agreement during that time, and that's really important to help reduce the costs of our businesses working together for the benefit of both countries.
So what about the second phase of the action plan 2013 and 2016?
What's new about this new partnership that we've agreed, this new action plan, is there is much more of a focus on 5 key strategic sectors, which are agriculture, education, tourism, aviation, and clean technologies and environmental management. And I think with a real focus and agreeing some roadmaps for action in those areas, we're going to see a real growth in the trade and economic relationship. But of course, it's not just about the trade and economic relationship. We have a broad-based relationship with Vietnam. So there's a whole lot of things that we're doing as part of this new action plan, and I'm really happy to be here to spearhead that for New Zealand.
So among the 5 key sectors, the Trade and Investment Cooperation is considered one priority in Vietnam and New Zealand bilateral relation, and the two nations aim to increase the two-trade weight from $600 million in 2012 to $1 billion by 2015. So how feasible is this target, and what have Vietnam and New Zealand agreed to achieve this goal?
I'm very confident that we will hit the $1 billion target by 2015. One way in which we're going to do this is by focusing in a more targeted way on those 5 key areas that I outlined. Those are areas where we have real opportunities, real benefits in working together. So that's going to be my focus for really lifting the trade and economic relationship to meet that target. But we're already doing very well. We have seen, for example, that Vietnam has entered New Zealand's top 20 export markets for the first time ever last year. And we're also seeing really good growth in Vietnamese exports to New Zealand. And I think it's really good for the relationship to have a good balance in the trade. So the other thing I think that's really important and that's going to drive the economic relationship and the trade relationship between our two countries is the conclusion of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. TPP is obviously a really important trade and economic agreement for the region, and I think as we see New Zealand and Vietnam concluding that agreement together, it's going to really lift the awareness of New Zealand and Vietnam and New Zealand, and I think that's going to drive much more business interest between our two countries.
Vietnam and New Zealand established the diplomatic relation on June 16, 1975. The bilateral relation now features regular high-level political visits, expanding trade and investment links, ongoing development assistance, and expanding cooperation in newer areas such as science and technology, two-way investment, education links, and trade in services. In September 2009, the two countries established the Bilateral Comprehensive Partnership. Bilateral trade has grown significantly since Vietnam and New Zealand signed a trade agreement in July 1994. Both countries are now also amongst the 9 countries negotiating a new Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement. Total two-way goods trade between Vietnam and New Zealand reached 777 million New Zealand dollars in 2012. Vietnam is one of the New Zealand aid program's core bilateral partners. The overall goal of the strategy is to support sustainable development through improving rural livelihoods and basic education opportunities, especially for poor and marginalized people. New Zealand also provides scholarships for postgraduate study in New Zealand, and Vietnamese officials attend the English Language Training for Officials, ELTO.
So talking about the investment from New Zealand to Vietnam, we know that there are now 20 projects worth about $77.8 million in Vietnam. So I'm wondering, have the New Zealand investors satisfied with the business environment in Vietnam, and what are your recommendations to Vietnam so that Vietnam can attract more investment from New Zealand to Vietnam in the year 2014 and in the longer future?
Well, I think the first thing is that I think there's a lot more potential to grow the investment relationship, but not just from New Zealand to Vietnam. I think there are also opportunities for Vietnamese companies to invest in New Zealand, and we've seen that with Vinamilk, for example, investing in New Zealand dairy companies in New Zealand, which is very welcome from our perspective. Our main investments in Vietnam at the moment are in the education and agricultural areas, and also there's some investment in mining here. But in terms of what can be done to continue to encourage New Zealand investors here, I think the key thing is making the rules and the regulations as transparent as possible and as simple as possible so people can understand what are the rules that they need to meet. And I think the third thing that's really, really important is to provide certainty to investors so that when those rules are put in place in a transparent way, they don't change too much over time, or they don't change frequently. And that gives investors confidence to be here for the long haul and to really contribute to Vietnam's development and prosperity. One of the things we're doing in New Zealand is we're really driving for delivery of government services online. And I think that's an area of real potential here, where in future people will be able to do a lot of their business with government online through e-services. Just to give you an example, in New Zealand now, if you want to register a company, you can register a company online, set up a company in 10 minutes. If you want to pay your income tax or your company tax, you can do it all online. And that has huge savings and reduces the stress and increases the transparency for the public and really helps business thrive. So those would be some things I would suggest which will really help to encourage investment into Vietnam.
So among the 5 key sectors, what will be the key sectors that will be the focus of the cooperation between New Zealand and Vietnam?
The areas that I'm really focused on beyond the traditional trade and economic area are firstly tourism. We're seeing an increasing number of New Zealand tourists, Kiwis coming from New Zealand to Vietnam, up 20% year on year over the many years now. And that's great, and it's not only good for Vietnam, it's also good for New Zealand as young Kiwis get to really experience Asia, and a great country in Asia. But also we want to see a lot more Vietnamese coming to New Zealand and discovering the amazing country that we have down in the bottom of the South Pacific. Education is the second one. We have more than 2,000 Vietnamese students studying in New Zealand, and we really want to encourage and see many more Vietnamese students getting a New Zealand education. The third priority that I'm very much focused on is how we develop our development assistance partnership that we have with Vietnam. So those are 3 areas in particular that I'm very focused on, which I think will bring a lot of benefit and understanding between our 2 countries.
So 2015 marks the 40th anniversary of Vietnam and New Zealand relations. So can you review some of the plans that Vietnam and New Zealand will cooperate to celebrate this special anniversary?
Yes, well, of course, most of that's secret, but no, we're going to be focused on, a series of activities which will be cultural, some business-focused, some education-focused. But the overall idea is to really try and engage with and get Vietnamese people thinking a lot more about New Zealand. And so we're going to be telling what we call the New Zealand story of open hearts, open minds, open spaces, which is what New Zealand represents. And I guess one thing I have to do in particular as New Zealand ambassador for that year is I have to really practice my Vietnamese. So when I do more interviews and when I'm giving speeches, I can say many better things in Vietnamese. So how would I say at the moment? I would say tôi phải học tiếng Việt.
And once again, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for joining our program today. And we hope that in the year 2015, you can master Vietnamese language.
Wow. Xin cảm ơn. Thank you.
And with that, we have to wrap up our program for today. For comment and feedback, don't hesitate to write to us at sharingvietnam@vtc.vn. And once again, Avan Hiệp, goodbye for now.